Welcome on into the Fantasy Football Forge. It is time for week 2. Looking back a little bit at week 1 for the quarterbacks and the tight ends. We'll look at waiver wire options for both of them, some usage situations potentially, just some information that we've gathered before we get into the rankings, which I have unceremoniously already screwed up and teased. My bad. So, just to let you know right over here, this is the fantasy points that were scored in week 1 for these players, and then of course their opponent. The initial opening Vegas lines, so you got the spread, give you a good idea of game flow. Is it going to work towards them having more passing attempts or being able to rush more? Obviously, red would be rushing more for the quarterbacks, and the implied point total. Are they supposed to score points? Are they supposed to build that lead to begin with? So those are the things that we will be looking at. Obviously, there is much more that impacts how these guys should and will end up being ranked. And if you want to see any changes that happen in the rankings between the time that I film this and when you're seeing it, and any other positions, anything, the rankings are up at the website, www.theffforge.com, and there's also a link in the description to the rankings. They should be up by the time that this video is going up. This will be the last of the videos. Wide receiver, running back videos should already be out there, be available for you to watch. And if you want my most up-to-date rankings outside of going onto the website, and maybe you have some questions, start-sit types of questions, you can come visit. Prior to kickoff on Thursday nights, I am streaming here live on YouTube for you to come ask any questions. Saturday evenings, I think I will pick that back up this week. It might be a little bit inconsistent for those, but every week, 3 hours, or at least almost every week, I might have to miss like a week this year. 3 hours prior to kickoff, I am available for all of your start-sit questions on Sundays. And then, of course, we got some funky weeks once we get into the holidays, which, we'll deal with those weeks when we get to those weeks. So let's get started with the quarterback rankings. We'll get started with the quarterback observations from this week. First of all, of course, Jackson Dart. His time may be coming sooner than later. Coming into the season, throughout the entirety of the offseason, before the New York Giants even drafted him, I kind of figured Jackson Dart comes in for the final 6 games of the year or something like that. However, week 1 was ugly. Part of the reason it's so ugly is their star offensive lineman and an already poor offensive line in general is currently missing. And that might be part of the reason why they're not going to go to Jackson Dart immediately. I still think we're looking at week 5, week 6 or something, or I think they have like a tough schedule and then a bye week, and then maybe week 7 they come back. Maybe they still follow that schedule. It depends exactly where they feel Jackson Dart is, how much pressure they have internally to keep their jobs or not this early on in the season. So, I think they'll take it smart, but it definitely could happen at any point based on how week 1 looked with Russell Wilson and how much they do seem to be in love and already maybe have some trust for Jackson Dart. Some quarterbacks who did not look good this week. So I'll get to Jackson Dart with the, he's just talking about waiver wire. He is a guy, if you have the ability to stash him, I do think that is probably worth a stash. He could end up being a surprise, real good option, and he has some rushing upside as well. Tua and Bo Nix did not look good this week. Rough game 1s for them. Not just in the stat box, they just didn't look that great. Michael Penix, Daniel Jones, Geno Smith, and of course Aaron Rodgers, they all looked good this week. Mostly, I'm buying out of those 4, Michael Penix and Geno Smith the most, especially when we're talking short term. If you need a quarterback this week, if you have that quarterback Brock Purdy, and he doesn't play this week. Daniel Jones is going up against Denver, so I really wouldn't want to do that, and I would like to see more of it. But Daniel Jones might be good this year. Also, if Justin Fields does happen to be available, which he probably shouldn't be, but he would probably be the top waiver wire option just in terms of offering you the most out of this bunch. Maybe not the most consistent, we'll see, but it was an impressive week 1. And, of course, Stafford is always a usable guy. There's nothing bad about having Matt Stafford on your bench or, as part of your quarterback options, week in and week out, any week, any matchup ultimately. And now, onto the rankings. How did I do last week with my loves and my fades? I did quite well. So to start off, I'm going to leave one of my fades off of this. So I loved Bryce Young and Joe Flacco. And I faded Bo Nix, Dak Prescott, and CJ Stroud, and one more guy. So if we just look at those 5 players, I went 5-1 in terms of my loves, outscoring my fades in fantasy points. It's not like Bryce Young and Joe Flacco did great. And I think Joe Flacco might have outscored one of those 3 by literally a 0.1 fantasy points. Nonetheless, still outscored him. 5-1 record there. But then Justin Fields outscores both of them, has a great week. He was my other fade. So I went 5-3 if we want to give a record for those loves and fades against each other. So regardless, I'm going to give myself a pat on the back. Definitely was correct on the Bo Nix, the Dak Prescott, CJ Stroud fades, and I think it was Joe Flacco did okay. Maybe it was Bryce Young then that just outscored one of those guys by 0.1 points. I don't know anymore. Let's get on to the Week 2 quarterback rankings, and then we're going to get on to the tight ends. There we go. I had a little technical difficulty. Our top quarterbacks here, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels. You're not sitting Burrow. I hope I don't have to explain this, especially given the fact that they're going up against Jacksonville. Let's move on to our second tier of guys. I have Justin Herbert at the top of this tier. I like that going up against Vegas. I've got Kyler Murray next going up against Carolina, so I'm going to give that a little bit of faith. Jordan Love going up against Washington. I still have a good feeling about him. Feel pretty safe about that. Justin Fields going up against Buffalo. A lot will be asked of him. Probably not a bad play this week. Could be another boom week for him. That's very possible. Vegas still not too high up on him. Still concerned about that. I am too, but it looked pretty good in week 1. It did. It really did. So he's just going to barely make that tier for me, in part because of some of the matchups for these other guys, like Patrick Mahomes going up against Philadelphia. It's a tough matchup. He's going to be down to, one guy who could probably get covered by Quinyon Mitchell and a bunch of other guys in his wide receiver room. I think it's going to be hard for him to have a big week again this week. Not that he couldn't do it. Brock Purdy, he is an injury. He is currently questionable this weekend, so we will see for sure on him. But if he's playing up against New Orleans, I like that quite a bit, even without George Kittle, unfortunately. And it does take down the ceiling. I would have been more optimistic about this if he had everybody in his wide receiver room and tight end room and was fully healthy. Dak Prescott, I'm still not going to lose my faith against the New York Giants. They're still going to be passing a lot. They still don't have the best rushing attack, despite how well it went for fantasy football in terms of Javonte Williams. It didn't necessarily look great, in my opinion. And that'll bring us on to the next tier, and you can see a little bit the tier below that. But still going to give a little bit of trust to Trevor Lawrence, but it was not pretty. I want to be very clear about that. But he's going up against Cincinnati. It's too juicy of a matchup to ignore. Going to have to be passing a lot. Going to be week 2. Things happen in week 1. I don't know. It was not pretty. We're hoping to see something better. Drake May right behind that going up against Miami. I could flip these two. Still like Drake May quite a bit. It wasn't the best week 1 ever, but expect that to be something that will grow and get better as the season goes along. And of course, he still has that rushing upside, which is why I end up liking him more than Jared Goff going up against Chicago. They're expected to win pretty handedly here. We'll see for sure about that. Early season Detroit might be shaky, but I know at least a part of their week 1 performance was definitely that Green Bay front 7. Baker Mayfield going up against Houston. It is a tougher matchup. They're actually expected to lose, not expected to be putting up a whole heck of a lot of points. Yeah, it's a tough matchup. I'm not expecting as big of a week for Baker Mayfield, but of course, all of these guys in this tier are still fine plays. Bo Nix, expect him to look better this week against Indianapolis. CJ Stroud, I didn't do my booms and busts, or my loves and my fades. I'm going to have to just look at this and then give you those after I get done going through with this. So CJ Stroud going up against Tampa Bay, I think that there's a little bit of upside in that. But Houston's front 7 against his offensive line, once again, going to be concerning for me. You know what? Houston's front 7 up against, what am I talking about? going up against Tampa Bay, so I'm a little bit more confident in that front offensive line of Houston against Tampa Bay's front seven. Not that it's anything like fantastic for him, for CJ Stroud in terms of that. It's always going to be a concern this year for as long as it is until it isn't. But nonetheless, I'm a little bit more optimistic about CJ Stroud, not a fade like I had him last week. Caleb Williams going up against Detroit. There's some upside here, passing upside, but I really didn't think that he'd look good. He, of course, makes the day with his rushing upside, so you can never ignore that. But, man, it takes him a long time to unload that ball. Like a really long time. I don't like that. J.J. McCarthy going up against Atlanta. This is a nice matchup. I might have to flip these two. I don't know. Just J.J. McCarthy doesn't have like as much rushing ups. He kind of does though, right? I might have to flip these two. J.J. McCarthy going up against Atlanta. I like that quite a bit. I guess what I'm going here is game flow. Caleb Williams might be having to pass more than J.J. McCarthy, and I still expect, especially we saw that in the second half, for Minnesota to really dedicate themselves to that run. And they seemed to not do that early game, and that seemed to hurt them. Like they were trying to get J.J. McCarthy going with a bunch of easy, stupid passes. I think that was a mistake, and I think that Chicago played it really well defensively. But I think they'll look better here in week 2, ride some of that that positivity from that comeback going into that matchup. Matthew Stafford going up against Tennessee. I don't mind Matthew Stafford this week. It's just nothing like I'm going crazy about him for. Geno Smith. Going up against the Chargers, I like it enough. A little bit on the lower end in terms of the upside there, but another 17.5-point week could very well be in the books. Tua Tagovailoa, I think we could say fade easily on that one. Bryce Young right behind that going up against Arizona. It just didn't look good week 1. This was my concern about everything about that offense all off season. And it starts out not so pretty for Bryce Young either this year. So we'll see. Going up against Arizona, it's an okay matchup there at least. Joe Flacco going up against Baltimore, going to be having to pass a lot. Looked fine in week 1. Got some penalties that really weren't his fault. Still, Vegas not really buying into them in this matchup, and I don't blame Vegas for that. I'm not going to argue with it. Daniel Jones going up against Denver. I really don't want to take a chance on that. Sam Darnold here going up against Pittsburgh. I don't want to discount that. Vegas isn't either on how good that defense might be, and Seattle struggled week 1 there. Aaron Rodgers going up against Seattle there this week. Did fine last week. I don't know that that's going to be that repeatable. It could be his best week of the year. Michael Penix looked good going up against Minnesota. It is a rougher-ish matchup, but not the worst matchup in the world. Russell Wilson going up against Dallas. There's some upside there. Maybe things will look better there against Dallas, who does not have as good of an ability to take advantage of the New York Giants' bad offensive line. And then Cam Ward, Spencer Rattler still going to be at the bottom here once again. The Los Angeles Rams front 7 against this Tennessee offensive line could really spell headaches for Cam Ward. He's off to a rough schedule. I'm just not talking about his play. Just a rough schedule for a rookie quarterback to have to walk into here for his first 2 games, especially in terms of like potential pressure on him, which we saw plenty of in week 1 there. So those are my quarterback rankings. Let me just look at this. I'll give you my fades and my loves. All right, here we go. So I've got Justin Fields at the top. Obviously I'm having faith in him. That's, I would say, more the theme here of my loves and fades are going to be 3 guys who maybe had a little bit of a disappointing week 1. Not that Drake Mays was too disappointing. And 1 guy who I was low on and might have been wrong on in terms of how much I was fading him. I was high on him originally in the offseason. But, Justin Fields, Dak Prescott going against the New York Giants. I expect that to rebound. Trevor Lawrence against Cincinnati. I think there's a good chance of a rebound there. Drake May against Miami. I think there's a really good chance of a big week there. So I'm going to give my faith to these guys. Baker Mayfield does have a good week 1, but fantasy-wise, if you watched the game, I did, I did not think that Baker looked very good. He was struggling without some of his weapons there. New offensive system, offensive line a little bit banged up going up against Houston this week. I don't like it a whole lot. I want to see him looking better before I'm eating too much of that one. And then, like I said, Tua's going to be a fade. Bryce Young's going to be a fade too. I want to see them do well. Even Tua against New England, there's a chance here. There's a chance, but I got to see them do well before I'm going to give them faith to be playing ultimately here. Hopefully, let's go on to the tight ends. Here we are with the tight end rankings video. So there are some injuries, interesting usage, and a lot of waiver wire options to go through here. So for the injuries, George Kittle, hamstring, I wrote 2+ weeks. I think the news is 3 to 5 weeks. Is the expectation for missed time for George Kittle. So that's not good. Brock Bowers, MCL sprain possible, 0+ weeks. He said he's not concerned about it. So we're not going to be too concerned about that at this point in time. But if something does pop up throughout the week, or if he's limited in practices, don't be too concerned about the limited. But if there's a report to say that that's worse, that's also a possibility. Evan Ingram, calf injury. I don't think we know more about that yet as of the time of recording this. We very well probably will by the time that this is out. But I would say Evan Ingram, I probably shouldn't be ranking him. I currently am ranking him. Some interesting usage situations. Harold Fannin Jr. gets 9 targets. We're going to look at the target totals for these guys. Of course, target totals are one sign of usage, opportunities, and opportunities are ultimately king in how we score fantasy points. So that's why we're keeping that on the screen there. And then Brenton Strange had a solid week there. I don't know why. I feel like I keep thinking it's better, or maybe I wrote down the wrong fantasy points for him. For my loves and my fades last week, I loved Mark Andrews for good reason. I wouldn't take that love back, even though it didn't come true. I expected a lot of touchdowns to be scored in that game, and Mark Andrews is the touchdown god. So, yeah, of course, I'm going to take a shot at that. Just for the exact same reason that I loved Dalton Kincaid, and that one did come through. And then I loved Brenton Strange, and he had a fine week, and I faded Jake Ferguson, and he did not have a good week. So, bada bing, bada boom. I would say, well, we went 3 for 4 there because Mark Andrews didn't come through, but nonetheless, I wouldn't take away the Mark Andrews love for anything. Last week. All right. We still got Trey McBride, Brock Bowers. Unfortunately, George Kittle, not up here. I had him in 2 leagues, so that sucks. 2 out of my 3 leagues. No George Kittle for a while. And then when he comes back, he's probably going to be blocking more than receiving for a little while, depending on how healthy they come back with him. Sam Laporta going to make it into this tier, going up against Chicago, a high implied point total. I like it. So I thought he was closer to these two, not that he's necessarily like in the same tier as them, than this next tier. I think there is a drop-off and a big second tier. Look at that. Going all the way from my tight end 4 to my tight end 19. Not that we couldn't have some sub-tiers within here, but generally speaking, I think it's just a conglomeration, and it's tough to truly pick who's going to do the best out of here. But David Njoku did still have 6 targets, still expect them to pass a whole heck of a lot this week. It was disappointing, but the targets were still there enough. We would like a few more targets. I don't want to blame Harold. Obviously, part of that is due to Harold Fannin Jr., but he could easily have 9 next week, and it wouldn't be a shock, especially in this matchup. So I still have some faith there for David Njoku for now. Once again, just like in the offseason, I did have concerns about him, and actually, I mentioned at least once this offseason Harold Fannin being a part of that concern. I just didn't think that would be something that we'd have to be concerned about at this point in the year. That's awesome. Travis Kelce, only 4 targets. I expect that to change this week up against Philadelphia, although Philadelphia is really, really good against tight ends. I am going to move Tyler Warren. We're going to call Tyler Warren, I don't know. He's going up against Denver. See, that's why I was afraid of that one. It's tough. I'm going to go Tyler Warren ahead of Travis Kelce. I'm not going to call him a boom. Mark Andrews, once again, highest implied point total. We'll give it one more week here for Mark Andrews, see if it comes through this week. But, like I said, once every 3 weeks is kind of what you expect for guys at this point. Tucker Kraft, only 4 targets, does good on those 4 targets, gets you a touchdown, thankfully. And, hopefully we'll see more targets go his way throughout the season than that. But going up against Washington, I'm not too afraid of it. Good implied point total. Dalton Kincaid comes through for you. Only 4 targets, touchdown. Game flow even working less so in favor of him than it is for Tucker Kraft. And so implied point total is about the same. Dallas Goedert we got right behind that, going up against Kansas City. So I definitely don't hate it. He's a guy who maybe... I do have loves and fades this week. There we go. TJ Hawkinson Ferguson. I forgot I did do that before. Going up against Atlanta, so I like that plenty. He only got 3 targets, he's definitely a rebound player, which is, I guess, why I have him this high. Evan Ingram, probably going to miss this week, but I ranked him for now there at my just inside my top 12. He did get 4 targets while he was in there. Jake Ferguson gets 6 targets. That's nice. He's a disappointment. It was against Philadelphia, so this is exactly what I said pre-game. I said why I said I was fading him is he might still get the targets, but what he'll be able to do with those targets, I wasn't so sure of. And sure enough, he wasn't able to do it, in part because specifically those linebackers and safeties are exactly why he didn't come through for you, actually. But going up against the New York Giants this week, that's a little bit better. So I do like Jake Ferguson this week enough. Brenton Strange going up against Cincinnati. Jacksonville should be throwing plenty. Let's give it another shot. I'm going to give him. I'm going to make him a love this week. Think he could have an even better week if Jacksonville could look a little bit better, right? Colston Loveland, I'm going to fade him because I didn't really have any fades necessarily this week. I've told you what I like and dislike about some of these. But Colston Loveland, I guess we're going to have to fade him. Only 2 targets. That stunk. And really didn't like how this offense looked last night. It is going up against Minnesota, though, so that's a good defense. Going up against Detroit next week. Could be a good defense as well, but there's some opportunity there. I'm not giving up on Colston Loveland yet. Not that I'm afraid to sit him, or if you really want to cut him, go right ahead, but you might regret that. He's a rookie, remember, which is good and bad for him that he's a rookie. Zach Ertz, 5 targets, not the most. He comes through on it, going up against Green Bay. I think Green Bay could be good against tight ends this year, but haven't proven that quite yet because that front 7. Kyle Pitts, Hunter Henry, Harold Fannin, all getting a good amount of usage, and because of that, having some good weeks. And I don't see much of a reason why that might not continue for them. And Hunter Henry going up against Miami is going to be my guy this week. I'm going to make him my other love of the week, but I don't necessarily, you can see, I don't have strong love or fade options here in this tier. It's yuck. It's not yuck. It's just there's a lot of options that might come through for you this week. Not short of that is Juwan Johnson going up against San Francisco. I probably should have him in this tier. 11 targets there. He came through for you. I don't know why I cut him out of that tier exactly, but I did. Sorry. But Juwan Johnson also a fine play. Dalton Schultz, Cade Otton, Mason Taylor, Chico Okonkwo, Jonnu Smith, Jatavian Sanders, Theo Johnson, Noah Fant. I'm going to call him a fade just in case anybody wants to get fancy out there because they're going up against Jacksonville, and he came through, had 5 targets once again. I don't expect that to repeat. I want to see it repeat before I go ahead and do that. Mike Gesicki right behind that. Pat Freiermuth, Cole Kmet in this next tier, followed by Higbee got no work. Elijah Royal, Will Dissly, Luke Musgrave, Terrence Ferguson at the bottom there. Not going to be ranking George Kittle, Isaiah Likely yet, or Darren Waller until we know about those guys. Not that I'm going to be, they're not going to be in my second tier, in my top 20. So there you go. That is it for week 2. Quarterbacks, tight ends. Think I covered it all. Thank you very much. Have a good one. Running back, wide receiver videos are already out. And Thursday and Sundays, you can come in for any of your start sit questions. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. It really does help. Peace out.